I thought I knew what happiness felt like. I was marrying Marcus, the man who made me laugh until my stomach hurt, who held my hand through every storm. We had planned everything together, from the color of the napkins to the songs we would dance to. Every choice felt like building our future, brick by brick. My sister helped me put on my dress that morning, tears running down her cheeks as she told me how beautiful I looked. Standing there in front of the mirror, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I had no idea that by sunrise, my entire world would be shattered into pieces I could never put back together. When it came time to choose my bridesmaids, there was only one person who could stand beside me as maid of honor. Her name was Rachel Kim, and she had been part of my life since we were 7 years old. We grew up on the same street, shared our first ice cream cones, cried together when boys broke our hearts. She knew every secret I had ever kept. That morning, she braided flowers into my hair and told me she was so proud of me, her eyes warm and loving. What I never imagined was that behind those kind eyes lived a monster waiting to destroy me. We chose a beautiful ranch in Colorado for our wedding, far away from the busy city streets. The place sat between tall mountains and green meadows, with a big wooden house that smelled like pine trees and fresh bread. It was peaceful and perfect. White horses grazed in the fields nearby, and at sunset, the sky turned pink and orange like a painting. We wanted our wedding to be small and full of love, surrounded by family and the people who truly cared about us. Everything looked so right. But sometimes the most beautiful places hide the darkest secrets, and I was about to learn that the hard way. We rented rooms at the ranch for everyone special to us, so they could stay the whole weekend. We wanted more than just a party. We wanted memories, laughter around the dinner table, stories told under the stars. It was supposed to be a celebration of love and friendship. The night before our wedding, we all ate together on the back porch. Candles flickered in glass jars, and someone played a guitar softly in the corner. Marcus smiled at me from across the table, and Rachel squeezed my hand like she always did when she was happy. Nobody knew that underneath all that peace, something terrible was growing, ready to explode and ruin everything. I went to bed that night with butterflies dancing in my belly, imagining what it would feel like to walk down the aisle. I kept thinking about the moment I would see Marcus waiting for me, about the promises we would make to each other. Sleep didn't come easy because I was too excited, too full of dreams. When morning came, sunlight poured through my window like liquid gold. Rachel was the first person to knock on my door, carrying a tray with toast and orange juice, smiling like she had won the lottery. Looking back now, I realized that smile was fake, painted on like makeup. But that morning I trusted her completely, felt safe and loved. My father walked me down a path covered in rose petals while a violin played a song that made everyone cry. The chairs were filled with people who loved us, and white ribbons hung from the tree branches like angel wings. Marcus stood at the end of the path wearing a dark blue suit, his eyes shining with tears. Every step I took toward him felt like magic. I believed with my whole heart that this was the beginning of forever. When the preacher asked if we promised to love each other always, I said yes without even thinking twice. My voice shook a little, but it was clear and honest. Marcus said yes too, but his smile seemed to fade just a tiny bit after the words left his mouth. I told myself it was just nervousness, that everyone feels a little scared when making such a big promise. We kissed while everyone clapped, and white doves were released into the sky. In that moment I thought nothing could ever go wrong. I was so wrong. The party afterward was exactly what we wanted. We ate delicious food under strings of lights that looked like stars, and music played from speakers hidden in the bushes. People danced on the grass, told funny stories about us, and raised their glasses to wish us a lifetime of happiness. Marcus talked to our guests and laughed at their jokes, but something in his eyes seemed far away. My mother stood up and gave a speech about watching me grow up, about how proud she was to see me marry someone who treated me well. Everyone cheered, and Marcus lifted his glass, but his smile didn't touch his eyes. It looked like he was acting in a play, saying the right words but feeling something different inside. Push the thought away. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong on the happiest day of my life. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that something wasn't right. I watched Marcus carefully, trying to find that spark he always had when he looked at me. But it was missing. I felt a small crack forming in my chest, even though I didn't understand why. I decided to ignore it and focus on enjoying the celebration. When the party ended, we walked together to the honeymoon cabin, a cozy little place decorated with fresh flowers and candles that smelled like vanilla. My heart was beating fast with excitement and a little bit of fear, imagining our first night as husband and wife. I wanted it to be special, to be something we would remember forever with smiles on our faces. Marcus took off his jacket and threw it on a chair, not looking at me even once. I moved closer to hug him, hoping to feel his warmth, and that's when he said it. "I'm tired," he said in a flat voice, like he was talking to a stranger at a bus stop, not his wife. I stood there frozen, wondering if I had heard him wrong, if maybe he was joking in a way I didn't understand. But his face showed no humor, no love, no anything. He unbuttoned his shirt slowly and walked to a small couch in the corner of the room. He laid down, turned his back to me, and said nothing else. The candles kept flickering, but the room felt cold and empty. I sat on the edge of our bed, alone. I waited and waited for him to change his mind, to come over and apologize, to explain what was happening. But he just laid there breathing softly, as still as a statue. Tears filled my eyes, and I tried so hard not to let them fall, not to make any noise. The room smelled beautiful, but inside my heart, everything was dying. This was supposed to be our special night, but I was alone, confused, and hurting. I don't know how long I stared at the ceiling, wishing this was all a bad dream that I would wake up from. I wanted Marcus to suddenly jump up and tell me he was sorry, that he was just scared or tired from the wedding. But nothing changed. The silence was so loud it hurt my ears. Eventually my body gave up, and I closed my eyes, falling into a restless sleep. I couldn't have slept for more than 20 minutes when a strange noise woke me up like a bucket of cold water. My eyes flew open, and my heart started pounding hard in my chest. I looked over to where Marcus had been sleeping, but the couch was empty. He was gone. I sat up slowly, my hands shaking, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. It was a weird noise, muffled and strange. I climbed out of bed and tiptoed to the door, opening it just a crack. The hallway was dark except for a thin line of light coming from under a door at the far end. The noise came again, and this time I recognized it. It was a sound people make when they're trying to be quiet but can't help themselves. My stomach twisted into knots as I stepped into the hallway, my bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. I tried to think of a good reason for what I was hearing, anything that made sense, but my brain kept going to dark places. Then I remembered whose room that was. It belonged to Marcus's aunt, who had left earlier in the evening because she said she felt sick and needed to go home. The room was supposed to be empty. So why was Marcus in there? And why was there another voice? My heart felt like it was going to explode as I moved closer, each step filling me with more fear. I didn't want to know what was behind that door, but I couldn't stop myself from finding out. Something inside me already knew the truth, even though my mind refused to accept it. I reached the door and pressed my ear against the wood, holding my breath so I could hear better. The bed creaked. Someone sighed. And then I heard her voice, clear as day. It was Rachel, my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. My legs almost gave out underneath me. I leaned against the wall, feeling like I might throw up or faint or both. I stood there shaking, unable to move, unable to breathe, just listening to sounds that tore my heart into shreds. The giggles I had heard a million times before, the voice that had comforted me through breakups and bad days, was now tangled up with my husband in a room that wasn't ours. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping this was a nightmare, but when I opened them again, I was still there in that dark hallway. And then I heard him. Marcus's voice, low and rough, saying Rachel's name like it was something precious. The sound of it hit me harder than a punch to the stomach. I felt my whole body go numb. Every memory I had of them flashed through my mind. All the times Rachel had visited when Marcus was home. All the times they laughed together at inside jokes I didn't understand. How stupid I had been not to see it. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry, but I made no sound. I just stood there, my whole world crumbling around me while they were in that room doing the one thing I never thought they would do to me. This was my wedding night. The night I was supposed to feel loved and cherished. Instead, I felt invisible, worthless, and completely betrayed. It was Marcus's voice that hurt the most, because it was supposed to belong to me. He had promised me forever just hours ago, in front of everyone we knew. And now he was in there with my best friend, breaking every single promise without a second thought. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, crying silently as the sounds continued. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life, like I had disappeared completely. Part of me wanted to scream, to kick the door down, to make them see what they had done. But I couldn't move. I was frozen by shock and pain. Eventually, I forced myself to stand up. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and made a decision. I was going to wait right there outside that door until they came out. I needed to see their faces. I needed them to know that I knew. So I stood in the dark hallway, arms crossed, my heart beating like a war drum, waiting for the moment of truth. Time moved like honey, slow and thick, every second feeling like an hour. I didn't move from my spot, barely breathed. I just waited, my mind blank except for one thought. They will have to face me. Finally, the door opened. Marcus stepped out first, his shirt hanging open and his hair a mess, looking like he had just woken up from a nap. When he saw me standing there, his whole body went stiff. His eyes got huge. His mouth opened but no words came out. He looked terrified, like he had seen a ghost. And then Rachel appeared behind him. Her dress was wrinkled and crooked, her lipstick smeared across her cheek, and she was holding her shoes in one hand. The second she saw me, she stopped breathing. Her face went white. She looked like she wanted to melt into the floor and disappear. For a moment, nobody said anything. We just stared at each other in horrible silence. I didn't need them to say a word. The guilt was written all over their faces like ink on paper. But I still asked. I looked at both of them and said, why? My voice was quiet but strong. I asked them how they could do this to me. How they could betray me on the one night that was supposed to be sacred. Marcus looked everywhere except at me. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. And then Marcus tried to lie. He said I was wrong, that I was seeing things that weren't there, that he was just helping Rachel find something his aunt had left behind. The lie was so bad, so weak, that it made everything hurt even more. He thought I was stupid. He thought I would believe him. Rachel just stood there crying softly, staring at the floor like a child caught stealing candy. Marcus kept talking, making up more lies, each one worse than the last. He looked at me like I was crazy, like I was the problem. But I wasn't going to let him twist this around. I told him I heard everything, every word, every sound, every lie. And there was no point in pretending anymore. Marcus's shoulders dropped. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath, like he was finally giving up the act. Then he admitted it. He said he had been confused for a while, like that excuse made any of this okay. He didn't say sorry. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He just said he was confused. Rachel started sobbing harder, covering her face with her hands, saying she was sorry over and over again like a broken record. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that things just happened, that she didn't plan it. But her tears meant nothing to me. She had thrown away years of friendship without thinking twice. She wasn't my friend. She was a stranger wearing Rachel's face. I felt something inside me shatter completely, something I didn't even have a name for. It was like my soul had been ripped in half. My knees felt weak, and my chest burned like someone had set it on fire. I couldn't catch my breath. But I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, hard anger that filled every part of me. My wedding had become a nightmare, and I was no longer the same person I had been that morning. I didn't waste any more words on them. I turned around, walked back to the cabin, and grabbed my things. I didn't care that I was still wearing my wedding dress or that my makeup was running down my face. I just needed to leave. I needed air that didn't smell like lies. I walked down the stairs and out the front door, not looking back even once. Nobody tried to stop me. I crossed the yard in bare feet, feeling the cold dew on the grass, and kept walking until the ranch house was just a shadow behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. I walked for what felt like forever, my dress dragging through dirt and mud, my feet aching and cold. The roads were empty and dark, with only the moon lighting my path. Nobody drove by. Nobody asked if I was okay. And honestly, I was glad. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to walk until the pain stopped, even though I knew it never would. Eventually, I found a wooden bench near an empty field and sat down. I was shivering from the cold, my body exhausted, my mind replaying everything over and over like a terrible movie. I tried to understand when things went wrong, when Marcus stopped loving me, when Rachel decided friendship didn't matter. But there were no answers, just pain. As the sky started turning gray with the first light of morning, I knew I couldn't stay out there forever. I stood up slowly, my whole body aching, and started walking back toward the ranch. I didn't want to go back, but something inside me needed to finish this the right way. I needed to tell the truth. When I got back, the ranch was quiet. Most people were still asleep. I slipped in through the back door and stood in the hallway, listening to the silence. The dining room was starting to fill with voices, people getting ready for breakfast like nothing had happened. They had no idea what kind of night I had just lived through, and that made me feel even more alone. I watched from the doorway as my family and friends sat around the table, eating fruit and drinking coffee, smiling and chatting about the beautiful wedding. They were living in yesterday while I was drowning in today. A cold anger grew inside me at all the normalcy, at how easy it was for everyone to pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. And they needed to know. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and walked into the room. I asked everyone to please come to the living room because I had something important to say. My voice was calm and steady, even though inside I was screaming. I didn't want drama. I just wanted truth. My father looked worried. My mother stood up right away. One by one, everyone stopped eating and followed me into the living room, confused and concerned. I looked around for Marcus and Rachel, but they were nowhere to be seen. Their absence told me everything I needed to know. They were cowards who couldn't even face the people they had hurt. And that made it easier to speak. Once everyone was seated, I started talking. I thanked them for being part of what should have been the happiest day of my life. And then, without hesitation, I told them the truth. I said that Marcus and Rachel had betrayed me together in his aunt's room on my wedding night, and that I was done with both of them. People gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others just stared at me in shock. I saw my mother's eyes fill with tears. My father's jaw tightened. But I kept talking, my voice never breaking, because I was finally taking back my power. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended them. Because deep down, everyone knew I wasn't lying. The room fell silent like a blanket had been thrown over everyone. Some people stood up, looking like they didn't know what to do with their bodies. Others sat frozen, unable to process what I had just said. My mother started crying quietly. Marcus's parents looked at the floor in shame. Nobody knew what to say. With my head held high, I announced that I was going to end this marriage, that I wanted nothing to do with Marcus or Rachel ever again, and that I hoped nobody would try to talk me out of it. I didn't need pity or comfort. I just needed respect. My father stood up and pulled me into a tight hug without saying a word, and I knew he was proud of me for standing up for myself. As I walked out of that room, I heard Marcus's mother crying softly, and his father trying to calm her down without much success. My parents followed me outside, their faces red not from sadness but from anger at what had been done to me. I was leaving behind more than just a wedding. I was leaving behind a version of myself that no longer existed. I left the ranch without looking back, carrying nothing but my dignity. The white dress was stained and torn, covered in mud and tears, and a story that would never be mine again. But I walked with my head up, like someone who survived a terrible storm and lived to tell about it. I ignored every call and message. That chapter of my life was over. When I got home, still feeling raw and broken inside, I called a lawyer and started the process to end my marriage. I didn't want time to think or people telling me to give it another chance. I wanted it done. I signed the papers and refused to see Marcus again, not for any reason. I was not the same woman who had said I do. A few weeks later, I heard that Marcus had moved in with Rachel like they had been planning this all along. They were seen walking around town together, holding hands, acting like what they did was some beautiful love story instead of a betrayal. He thought he had found something real, something worth destroying me for. But life has a way of paying people back for the hurt they cause. It didn't take long before the cracks started showing. Word got around that they were fighting all the time, yelling so loud the neighbors could hear through the walls. Rachel didn't smile anymore. Marcus started staying out late to avoid going home. What began as a secret romance turned into regret, blame, and constant arguments. She had lost everything for a man who didn't know how to love anyone but himself. And then one day Marcus disappeared. He left Rachel alone in their apartment with nothing but a note and another lie. He had cheated on her with someone else, someone younger who didn't know their ugly history. He did to her exactly what he did to me because that's who he was. It was never about love. It was about his ego and his selfishness. Rachel was left with nothing. No boyfriend, no friends, no one who trusted her. And for the first time she understood what she had done to me. But by then it was too late. Rachel tried to rebuild her life, but nobody wanted to be around her. Her old friends turned away. My family wanted nothing to do with her. She had destroyed everything good in her life for a man who threw her away like garbage. She finally felt what it was like to be completely alone, and there was no one left to call. Meanwhile, I focused on healing. I threw myself into my work, building something that was mine and mine alone. I made new friends who didn't know my past and didn't judge me for it. I learned to make decisions based on what was good for me, not what made other people happy. Slowly, the sadness turned into strength. I felt proud of myself for the first time in a long time. I opened a small coffee shop, then another one, and before I knew it, people were talking about my business. Magazines wanted to interview me. Customers loved my shops. Suppliers respected me. But I wasn't doing it for fame. I was doing it because it made me feel whole again. I was building a life that nobody could take from me. I opened a third shop and then a fourth, and my name became known in the community. People asked how I did it, how I went from heartbreak to success so quickly. But I didn't have a secret formula. I just refused to let my pain define me. I chose to grow instead of shrink. 3 years passed. My life was calm, steady, and full of purpose. I didn't cry about that night anymore. No longer controlled me. I had left Marcus and Rachel in the past where they belonged. I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And just when I stopped looking for love, it found me anyway. I met him at a small business event, surrounded by other shop owners and entrepreneurs. His name was David Carter, and he spoke with a kindness that made me feel safe instead of nervous. He didn't try to impress me or show off. He just listened when I talked and asked questions that showed he actually cared. I didn't feel fireworks, felt peace. And that's when I knew something real was starting. With David, everything was different from the very beginning. There was no rush, no games, no empty words. Just honest conversations, respect, and comfortable silences that didn't feel awkward. He didn't push me or try to fix me. He just walked beside me, letting me set the speed. Slowly, I started looking forward to seeing him, hearing his voice, missing the way he smiled at me. It wasn't wild or crazy. It was deep and real. It was a kind of peace I had never felt before. At first, I was scared to trust my own happiness. I kept waiting for something bad to happen, for him to hurt me like Marcus did. But David was patient. He understood without me having to explain everything. He showed me through his actions that love doesn't have to hurt, that people can be honest and kind and loyal all at once. I learned to trust again, not because he asked me to, but because he made it safe for me to do so. And with that, The wound Marcus left finally started to heal. When we made our relationship official, it felt natural and easy. There was no need to hide or pretend. People around me noticed the change. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually living. With David, I traveled to new places, worked on new projects, and enjoyed simple moments that became precious memories. He didn't promise me forever. He gave me a real, honest today. And after everything I had been through, that meant more than any promise ever could. Somehow, Marcus found out I was happy with someone new, and he sent me a message full of fake nostalgia. He said he was glad I was doing well, that he sometimes thought about what we lost, and that he wished me the best. But I could feel the bitterness between the lines. He couldn't stand knowing that the person he destroyed was now thriving. I didn't reply. I owed him nothing. One afternoon, Marcus showed up at one of my coffee shops without warning. He looked thin and tired, his eyes dull like someone who had lost their way. He asked if we could talk for just a few minutes, said he needed closure. I looked at him calmly, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness. He simply didn't matter anymore. I told him to make it quick because I had work to do. He started talking about how he had made a mistake, how he had been a coward, how he lost the best thing that ever happened to him. I stood there listening without any emotion on my face, like someone watching rain fall from inside a warm house. When he finished, I looked him in the eye and told him he had no power over me anymore. I said that what we had was dead, that he couldn't get back something he destroyed with his own hands. I made it clear that I didn't want to see him again, that there was no space for him in my life. There was no yelling or crying, just a firm, cold final goodbye. Marcus tried to smile like he still thought he could change my mind, but he wasn't the man who once made my heart race. He looked small, unimportant, and completely irrelevant. I asked him to leave, and this time I was the one who closed the door. He walked away without another word, his shoulders slumped, knowing he had lost me forever. Before he left, his eyes showed frustration, like he couldn't understand how I had moved on so easily. He mumbled something about me replacing him too fast, trying one last time to hurt me. But his words bounced off me like rain off a roof. What would have broken me before meant nothing now. He left defeated, and I sat down at my desk feeling lighter than I had in years. When the door closed behind him, I took a deep breath and felt true freedom for the first time. I didn't feel victorious or angry. I just felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when you finally close a painful chapter without losing yourself in the process. I wasn't a victim or a survivor or anyone's ex. I was just me, whole and at peace. David walked in a few minutes later, not knowing what had just happened, but when he saw me, he hugged me without asking questions. He didn't need an explanation. He just gave me his presence, his support, and his love. I looked at him and realized that life, even with all its pain, had brought me to him for a reason. With David by my side, I didn't feel lost or scared. Felt at home. And I finally understood what real love looked like. I realized that nothing in life is promised, that even the strongest love can break without warning, and that loyalty doesn't always come from the people you think it will. But I also discovered that pain isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of something you can't see yet. The broken pieces of who I used to be gave me the foundation to rebuild myself stronger and freer. I learned that surviving deep betrayal doesn't just heal you, transforms you. And I had been transformed completely. Today, I look back at that night without bitterness or regret because it no longer controls me. I'm still with David. My shops are growing. My life is peaceful and bright. I don't need anyone's approval or validation. I only need to stay true to myself. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about dignity. Because my happy ending didn't come from finding the right man. It came from becoming the right woman, the one who knows her worth and refuses to settle for less. I never saw Marcus or Rachel again, and I didn't need to. Not because I forgave them, but because they simply don't exist in my world anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I would ever trust someone again after what happened, and I always tell them the same thing. Not only did I trust again, but I learned to choose better. David didn't come to save me. He found me already whole and chose me exactly as I was. I know my story isn't unique. There are so many women who have been betrayed, hurt, and abandoned when they least expected it. But if there's one thing I want to leave with you, it's this. Don't let someone who doesn't know how to love break you into pieces. Don't stay where there's no respect. The strongest love you'll ever have is the love you give yourself. Everything else should just be extra, never the main thing. Today, I'm writing this from my balcony with a cup of hot chocolate while David reads beside me and the sun slowly sets. Peace doesn't sound like fireworks or grand gestures. It sounds like quiet moments, mutual respect, and knowing that you don't need anything else to feel complete. If you ever thought true love wasn't meant for you, let me tell you something important. It doesn't come when you're searching for it. Comes when you finally choose yourself first. Sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I catch my reflection in a window and stop for a moment. I don't look for approval in my own eyes anymore or search for the love I dreamed about as a little girl. I just look to see if I recognize myself. And there I am, with scars, yes, but also with a strength I used to think was weakness. I learned that pain can break you, but it can also rebuild you into someone stronger and more aware. I keep a small box with pieces from that day. Not to torture myself, but to remember how far I've come. Every dried flower, every photograph is proof of a version of me that died that night so a better version could be born. I don't throw the box away. I respect it because without it I wouldn't be here. David sometimes looks at me like he can't understand how someone who was so hurt can love so peacefully. And I just smile. Not because the past doesn't hurt, but because it doesn't control me anymore. When love is real, it doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller or sacrifice your peace. Real love starts when you stop begging for affection and realize that whoever chooses you should do it freely. And so my story ends, not with a dramatic kiss or a perfect wedding, but with a cup of hot chocolate, a hand to hold, and a heart that's finally at peace. Because I learned that a happy ending isn't about finding the perfect man. It's about becoming the woman who doesn't need to be saved from anything. It's about living in peace, in truth, and in love. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on JAMAL'S Stories channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.